I never meant to fall for her, the woman who taught me everything about restraint, until the night she whispered, "If this is wrong, then I don't want to be right." When I first moved into that apartment complex, I wasn't looking for anyone or anything new. I just wanted quiet, a place where I could start over without too many questions. The building was old, a little weathered around the edges, but it had this kind of charm that grows on you. Iron balconies, cracked stone pathways, and vines curling up the walls like they'd been there forever. My apartment faced the courtyard. Every evening, I'd sit by the window with a cup of coffee, watching the world fade into that golden hour when everything feels softer, calmer. That's when I first noticed her. She lived directly across from me, Elena. I didn't know her name then, just the woman in the pale blue dress, watering her plants on the balcony as if the whole world slowed down for her. She moved with a kind of grace that didn't demand attention, but somehow always had mine. Her hair was dark and loosely tied, strands catching the light. And there was something in her posture, a quiet confidence, maybe, or the peace of someone who'd long stopped pretending for the world. I remember one evening especially. The air was heavy with the scent of rain, thunder rumbling somewhere distant. I was watching the first drops fall when I heard it, her humming. Soft, almost like she was trying not to be heard, but the sound carried across the courtyard anyway. It wasn't a song I recognized, but it made the moment feel still, like nothing else mattered. We didn't speak that day, or the next, but every time I saw her, stepping out to collect her mail, laughing on a phone call, brushing a stray petal off her balcony railing, I felt something stir quietly in me. Not attraction, not at first. More like curiosity mixed with a kind of calm admiration. She seemed older than me, sure, but that wasn't what stood out. It was the way she carried herself, like she'd lived through enough to understand the value of small moments. One morning, I caught her eyes for the first time. I'd been locking my door when she stepped out, holding a small basket of oranges. Our eyes met, just a second too long, and she smiled. Not one of those polite smiles people give out of habit, but something warmer, knowing. She said, "Good morning," her voice smooth and steady. And for some reason, my heart forgot how to respond. That night, I told myself it was nothing, just neighborly kindness. But when I looked out at her window again, her light was still on. She was sitting at her table, writing something in a notebook, the glow from her lamp falling over her shoulders. And maybe it was the loneliness, or maybe it was her calm presence. But in that quiet moment, I realized I'd started waiting for those small glimpses of her, like tiny sparks in the stillness of my days. The first time I actually stepped inside Elena's apartment, it wasn't planned. A thunderstorm had rolled in out of nowhere that night, the kind that turns the sky into a restless pulse of lightning. The power went out across the building, plunging everything into darkness. I remember standing in my doorway, listening to the hum of rain against the glass when I saw a faint flicker from across the hall. Candlelight. Her door was open, just a crack. Before I could talk myself out of it, I knocked. "Hey, do you have any candles to spare?" I asked, half shouting over the storm. Elena appeared, holding a candle in one hand, the soft glow tracing the lines of her face. Her expression shifted from surprise to warmth. "Come in," she said, her voice calm, like she'd been expecting me. Her apartment was different from mine, cozier, filled with books and plants and soft amber tones. It smelled faintly of coffee and something floral. The storm outside faded into a low hum as she poured us each a cup. "I didn't take you for the type to knock during a blackout," she teased, handing me the mug. Her fingers brushed mine, just lightly, and even that tiny contact sent a warmth up my arm I couldn't quite name. We sat by the window, the candle between us flickering like it knew how to listen. At first, we talked about harmless things, work, neighbors, the unreliable wiring in old buildings. But little by little, the conversation slipped into deeper places. She told me she'd been living there for nearly 10 years, that she'd once dreamed of opening a small gallery before life took her in another direction. There was a softness in her voice when she spoke about missed chances, not regret exactly, more like acceptance with a trace of longing. When she asked about me, I hesitated. It had been a hard year, a broken relationship, a few lost jobs, the kind of drift that makes you wonder who you're becoming. Somehow, I found myself telling her things I hadn't told anyone in months. She didn't interrupt or offer advice. She just listened, eyes steady, presence quiet but grounding. Every so often, lightning would flash through the window, illuminating her face, thoughtful, a little sad, but beautiful in its honesty. She reached forward once, placing her hand gently on my forearm. "It gets better," she said simply. And somehow, I believed her. By the time the storm eased, we were laughing softly about nothing at all. Hours had passed without either of us noticing. When I stood to leave, she walked me to the door. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air between us felt charged, not like the storm outside, but something deeper, unspoken. "Thank you," I said, meaning it in more ways than one. She smiled, her voice barely above a whisper. "Anytime." And as I stepped back into the hallway, the echo of candlelight and her laughter followed me. Quiet proof that something had shifted between us, though neither of us would admit it yet. After that night, something subtle changed between us, though neither of us dared to say so. It wasn't dramatic or obvious. It lived in the quiet pauses, in the glances that lingered a little too long, in the way her laughter seemed softer when I was near. Days passed, and life returned to its usual rhythm. I'd see Elena in the courtyard, pruning her plants or talking briefly with the mailman. She always greeted me with that same warm smile, but now it carried an undercurrent, a shared secret we hadn't named. I started noticing the smallest things. The way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear when she was thinking. The faint perfume she wore, something with jasmine, maybe, that stayed in the air long after she walked past. And whenever she spoke to me, I felt caught between comfort and tension, as if standing too close to a flame that didn't burn but still reminded me it could. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just neighborly friendship, just gratitude for her kindness that night. But when I saw her one evening, standing by her window, light falling across her face as she read, I felt that quiet pull again, the one I couldn't reason my way out of. That night, I couldn't focus on anything. I found myself replaying our conversation in my mind, her steady voice, her words about how it gets better. There had been something in her tone, almost as if she was speaking to herself as much as to me. The next day, I ran into her in the elevator. It was such an ordinary moment, but the air felt heavier, charged. She was holding a grocery bag, and I reached to press the floor button just as she did, our hands brushing for a second. She looked up, startled, then smiled faintly. "Seems like we keep meeting in storms and elevators," she said. Her eyes held mine for a heartbeat too long. I felt it then, that delicate balance between wanting to step closer and knowing I shouldn't. We didn't talk much on the way up. The hum of the elevator filled the silence. But when the doors opened, neither of us moved immediately. She finally said, "Well, have a good evening," her voice quieter than usual. "You too," I replied. My chest felt tight, though I couldn't have said why. As she walked away, I watched her until she disappeared behind her door. And for the first time, I realized that something invisible had settled between us. Not quite love, not yet, but the weight of awareness. That night, I stood by my window again. Her curtains were half drawn, the light inside warm and low. She looked up once, as if sensing me there, and our eyes met through the glass. Neither of us smiled, neither of us looked away, just a silent acknowledgement of everything we weren't saying. And in that stillness, I understood. The more we tried to ignore it, the louder it quietly became. It had been almost 2 weeks since that quiet moment through the window, 2 weeks of pretending everything was normal. We spoke briefly in passing, shared polite smiles, but every word felt careful, filtered. I could sense she was doing the same, keeping a respectful distance, as if space could somehow quiet what was building between us. Then the storm returned. It came late, unexpected, shaking the windows and drenching the courtyard in sheets of rain. The thunder rolled so close it made the lights flicker. Then everything went black. I stood there for a while, staring at the lightning outside, my thoughts already drifting to her. Before I could stop myself, my phone lit up with a message. "Elena, are you okay?" Just 3 words, but they carried more weight than a full conversation. I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. Then, without thinking, I grabbed my jacket and crossed the hall. When she opened the door, candlelight washed over her face, soft and golden against the storm's blue flashes. She looked relieved, but her expression carried something else too. Something uncertain, almost vulnerable. "I didn't mean to worry," she said. "I just didn't like the thought of you sitting in the dark." I smiled faintly. "Guess we're making a habit of this." She laughed, but it came out quiet, almost shy. "Maybe we are." Inside, the apartment smelled of candle wax and rain. The storm outside beat against the glass, but in here it was warm, almost safe. She poured tea this time, not coffee, and we sat close enough that the candle's glow reached both our faces. We talked about nothing, about everything. The conversation wandered through memories, regrets, and strange what-ifs. I noticed how her voice softened when she spoke about her younger years, the dreams she once chased, the choices she'd learned to live with. At one point, the thunder cracked so loud it made her flinch. Without thinking, I reached over, my hand brushing hers on the table. She didn't pull away. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was fragile, suspended. I could hear the rain sliding down the window, the faint rhythm of her breathing. When I finally spoke, my voice came out low. "Elena." She looked up, eyes wide and unguarded. "I know," she said before I could finish. "I've been trying not to, but I know." Her words hung there, trembling between confession and caution. She drew a slow breath, her eyes glistening in the candlelight. "I don't know what this is," she whispered, "but it feels right." I didn't move, didn't speak. I just let the moment exist. Two people sitting in the dark, hearts louder than the storm outside. When lightning flashed again, her hand tightened around mine, and for the first time, neither of us tried to let go. The storm passed sometime before dawn, but I barely slept. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the echo of her hand in mine, the quiet certainty in her voice when she said it felt right. By morning, everything looked deceptively ordinary. The courtyard glistened with leftover rain, and sunlight poured through the windows like nothing had happened at all. But something had happened, something small yet irreversible. I told myself to carry on as usual, to give her space, to not read too much into one moment. But by mid-morning, I found myself standing outside the cafe, near the corner, the one she always mentioned she liked. I didn't even know if she'd come, but some part of me hoped she would. And she did. She walked in wearing a cream-colored coat, her hair loosely pinned, eyes still holding that morning light. When she saw me, she hesitated just for a second, long enough to remind me she'd been thinking about this too. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, voice calm but eyes unsure. "Please," I said, and stood to pull out her chair. We ordered tea and toast. For a while, we spoke like nothing unusual had passed between us, about the storm, about work, about the neighbor's broken mailbox. But every word seemed to circle around what neither of us was saying. At one point, I noticed her stirring her tea long after the sugar had dissolved. Her fingers trembled slightly. I reached out, gently touching her wrist. She froze, then looked up, eyes searching mine. "Elena," I said softly, "we don't have to pretend it didn't happen." She took a deep breath, setting the spoon down. "People wouldn't understand," she murmured. "They'd say it's wrong. They always do." Her words carried the weight of experience, of judgment, of whispers, of years spent caring about what others thought. I wanted to tell her that none of it mattered, that what we'd shared wasn't wrong. But I could see the battle in her eyes, the tug-of-war between fear and feeling. So instead, I just said, "Then let's not tell them yet." She looked at me for a long moment. Then her shoulders relaxed, and a faint smile touched her lips, small but real. We sat in silence after that, the kind that didn't demand filling. The cafe buzzed softly around us, clinking cups, murmured conversations, the smell of baked bread and fresh coffee. And there we were, two people caught between what we knew and what we couldn't deny. When we finally left, she paused at the door. The morning sun caught the edge of her hair as she turned to me and said, almost in a whisper, "You make it hard to do the right thing." I wanted to answer, but the word stayed trapped somewhere behind my ribs. She smiled faintly, then walked away, her steps slow, deliberate, leaving me with the taste of her voice lingering like something I wasn't ready to let fade. For a while, we lived in the comfort of unspoken understanding. We didn't label what we were, didn't talk about the night of the storm or the quiet breakfast that followed. But it was there, in the way her eyes softened when she saw me, and how my day always seemed to find its rhythm around hers. Yet the world notices things you try hardest to hide. It started with the neighbors. A few casual glances, small smiles that felt too knowing. Once, as I held the lobby door open for her, I heard a whisper behind me. Someone saying, "She's old enough to know better." The words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they came from that place where people confuse age with permission to judge. After that, Elena became quieter. She still smiled, still waved when we passed, but something in her had retreated. I could feel it, that careful wall she'd rebuilt to protect herself. One evening, I saw her in the courtyard, sitting on the bench beneath the oak tree. Her book was open but unread. I wanted to go to her, but I hesitated, unsure if my presence would make things harder. Eventually, I did go. "You've been avoiding me," I said gently, standing a few steps away. She looked up, her expression soft but tired. "Not avoiding," she murmured. "Just trying to breathe." I sat beside her, not too close. "Is it because of them?" Her silence said enough. "They don't know you," I said. "They don't know us." She gave a small, sad smile. "They don't have to. People see what they want to see. And maybe they're right to. Maybe this is foolish." Her voice trembled slightly on the last word. I hated how much it hurt to hear that. "You once told me," I said quietly, "that it gets better. Maybe this is what better looks like, even if it's complicated." She looked at me then, really looked, the kind of gaze that felt like a confession. That night, I wrote her a note instead of knocking on her door. Just a folded piece of paper slipped beneath it. "You don't have to choose between being right and being happy. I don't want to be the reason you hide, but I also don't want to pretend I don't feel this." I didn't expect a reply, but the next evening, as I came home, she was waiting outside my door. No words, no explanations, just standing there, clutching the note. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I read it," she said simply. And she took a small step forward, close enough that I could feel her breath. "And I'm tired of pretending too." Her hand found mine, tentative, trembling, but she didn't let go. The hallway was quiet except for the faint hum of a distant elevator. No neighbors, no whispers, no judgment. Just us, finally choosing the truth, no matter who might be watching. Autumn came quietly that year. The courtyard leaves turned shades of amber and gold, drifting down like old memories finally letting go. Life outside moved on as if nothing had happened. Neighbors with their routines, the city's hum unchanged. But for us, everything felt different. We didn't hide anymore, not really. There were still glances, still whispers, but they no longer carried the power they once did. Maybe we had both simply grown tired of living by what other people thought was right. We began spending small, ordinary moments together. Morning coffee on our balcony, walks to the corner store, quiet dinners where words weren't necessary. It wasn't dramatic or secretive. It was just ours. One evening, we went down to the river. The sky had begun to darken, streaked with that soft orange light that makes everything feel more honest. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain and fallen leaves. She wore a gray scarf, the one she always said made her feel a little less invisible. We walked slowly, our hands brushing now and then, not by accident anymore. For a while, we didn't speak. There was comfort in the silence, the kind that only comes when you've already said everything that matters. Finally, she stopped and looked out over the water. "Do you ever think about how strange this is?" she asked. Her voice wasn't uncertain, more curious, like she was still trying to understand the depth of what we'd become. "Every day," I said honestly, "but strange doesn't always mean wrong." She smiled faintly, her gaze still fixed on the river. "I've spent most of my life doing what's expected, saying the right things, making the right choices, being the person everyone else needed me to be. She paused, her voice softening. But for once, I just want to feel alive, even if it makes no sense to anyone else. I turned to her, watching how the fading light caught her face, that quiet strength, that grace I'd come to know so well. Maybe, I said, what's right isn't about what makes sense to others. Maybe it's about what feels honest when no one's looking. She looked at me then, really looked, as if she was memorizing the moment. Her eyes shimmered with something between peace and surrender. A gust of wind lifted her hair, and she reached for my hand, not hesitantly this time, but with certainty. Her fingers intertwined with mine, warm against the chill of evening. "If this is wrong," she said softly, her voice trembling but sure, "then I don't want to be right." The world seemed to fall silent after that. The river moved quietly, the wind stilled, and in that suspended moment, all the noise of judgment and fear faded away. I squeezed her hand, feeling her pulse steady against my own. "Then maybe," I whispered, "we've finally found something worth being wrong about." She smiled, a small, unguarded smile that felt like a beginning. And as the last of the daylight slipped beneath the horizon, I realized that sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't choosing what's right, it's choosing what's true.